They tried to sell my ranch while I was burying my father. Not fine me, not threaten me, not drag me into one more petty HOA argument, sell it. My family's 47-acre Colorado ranch worth about $2.3 million, with my cattle still on the land and my wife's wind chime still hanging on the porch while I was 800 miles away trying to put my father in the ground. I got home a little after 6 in the morning, dusty, hollow-eyed, still wearing the same black shirt from the funeral I had to cut short. The sun was just starting to break over the front range, turning the frost gold, and for one split second I thought maybe Emma had panicked over nothing. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I was about to pull in, feed the cattle, sit on the porch, and grieve in peace. Then I saw the sign, a giant auction sign, staked right into my yard, not near the fence, not by the road, but in my yard, and two strangers in expensive boots walking my land with clipboards like they were already spending the money. One of them was measuring my cedar fence. My grandfather built that fence in 1967 with his own hands. I still remember the smell of the posts when I was a kid, the sound of him pounding them, and the way he'd stop, wipe his brow, and say, "Land only belongs to the people willing to bleed for it." Apparently, Karen Whitfield never heard that speech. Karen was the president of the Maplewood Heights HOA, the subdivision developers built next to my ranch 3 years earlier. She was one of those people who moved out to the country because she liked the idea of it, not the reality. She liked sunsets, but not livestock smells. She liked fences, but only if they matched. She liked community standards, which is a fancy way of saying she thought everybody else should live like they were afraid of her. The trouble started the minute that subdivision went up. First, it was my fence, supposedly 18 inches onto their common area. Then it was complaints about cattle odor in July. Imagine moving next to a ranch and discovering cows smell like cows. Then my gravel access road offended their entrance median, because nothing says tyranny like a woman in a blazer getting emotionally wounded by gravel. Every month it was something new, notices, threats, little power plays. But I never joined their HOA, never signed a thing, never gave them 1 inch of my property, and that made Karen crazy. She couldn't stand that there was one patch of land beside her kingdom she didn't control. I killed the truck engine, stepped out, and asked the two men what exactly they thought they were doing on my property. The taller one barely looked at me. He just said, "Calm as you please, pre-auction assessment, sir. Property is scheduled for public sale Saturday." For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. My brain was still full of funeral hymns and hospital smells. Then the words landed, and the exhaustion in me turned into something mean and sharp. "This is my ranch," I told him. "You are trespassing." That's when Karen's white Mercedes came flying up my driveway, throwing dust all over the fence line. She got out dressed like she was heading into a board meeting at a country club, instead of trying to steal a family legacy at dawn. She gave me that fake little smile, the kind people wear when they think paperwork is stronger than truth. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "you're interfering with a legal assessment." Legal according to who? According to Karen, I owed $47,000 in HOA fines and fees. According to Karen, my fence created some kind of abandonment issue. According to Karen, I had ignored certified notices and forfeited my rights. According to Karen, the property was headed to auction. According to me, she had lost her damn mind. Then she did something so outrageous, it almost would have been funny if it hadn't been my life. She called 911 and reported me for trespassing on my own ranch. Deputy Maria Santos showed up. About 20 minutes later, stepped out of her cruiser, looked at me, looked at the auction sign, looked at Karen, and I could see the confusion on her face. Maria knew me. Her daughter and my daughter Emma had been in the same school events for years. She knew I wasn't exactly the type to break into my own front yard before breakfast. Karen launched into her performance anyway, waving a folder full of papers, talking about statutes, violations, authority, abandonment, all that polished bureaucratic nonsense people use when they want theft to sound respectable. I showed Maria my deed, my tax records, everything I had on my phone. Maria looked from my documents to Karen's and said the only honest thing anybody had said all morning, "This looks like a civil matter." Karen didn't like that. Karen wanted handcuffs. Karen wanted me humiliated, removed, erased. Instead, she got a deputy telling her nobody was arresting a man standing on land his family had owned for 6 decades. That should have stopped it. It didn't. By 2 that afternoon, Karen had called an emergency board meeting at her house to push the auction forward. I wasn't invited, which was rich considering they were trying to sell my land. I went anyway, sat across from that board while they shuffled papers and acted like they were deciding the fate of some abandoned lot instead of a home where my wife's ashes had once rested on the mantel. That was the first time I saw the survey Karen kept waving around, dated 2022, signed by a surveyor named Robert Kumar from Mountain West Land Services. According to that paper, my fence encroached onto HOA land. There was just one problem. My grandfather's original 1967 survey showed the fence was actually 3 feet inside my own property line. Not on the edge, not questionable. 3 feet inside. Safe, clear, settled before Karen was old enough to ruin a neighborhood. Still, Karen pushed. Dr. Stanton, her vice president, backed her. Jennifer Walsh, the secretary, produced meeting records I'd never seen. Marcus Chen looked sick. Patricia Vance looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. When the vote came, they approved the auction 3-1 with one abstention, predetermined, ugly, rotten from the start. Sunday morning, Karen held a pre-auction showing on my ranch. That was the moment it stopped being just a property fight and turned into a public humiliation ritual. She was literally walking potential buyers around my family land, pointing out development potential, while I sat on my porch drinking coffee, still half numb from burying my father. So every time a buyer came near the house, I stood up and introduced myself. Morning, I'm Jake Morrison. I own this ranch. You interested in buying stolen property? One developer left immediately. A young couple looked horrified. A real estate investor started asking Karen about title insurance, permits, proof of authority, the kind of questions she couldn't answer without lying harder. And that's when the story cracked open. My neighbor, Tommy Martinez, had been filming from his bedroom window. Tommy was 23, sharp as a tack, ran a YouTube channel called Rural Real Talk, and had one of those faces that looks half amused even when he's furious. He jogged over camera in hand and said, "Jake, this is insane. People need to see this." I almost said no. I'm a rancher, not a man who likes turning pain into content. But then I looked at the flyers Karen had posted around the subdivision, advertising my land like I was already dead, and I told him to hit record. That Sunday night, Tommy went live. By Monday, the video was everywhere locally. Neighbors were arguing online. Reporters were calling. People who'd been too scared to speak started whispering stories about Karen's fines, Karen's threats, Karen's little empire of intimidation. Mrs. Patterson admitted Karen had tried to fine her for roses. Others came forward with their own stories. You could feel the ground shifting under Karen's heels. And then my daughter Emma found the first real crack in Karen's whole operation. Emma was 16, smart, stubborn, too observant for her own good, just like her mother. She called me into the kitchen Tuesday morning and said, "Dad, I don't think they even have the legal permits to hold an auction." Turns out she was right. The county clerk confirmed no auction permit had been filed. No valid ownership documents had been submitted. No legal basis existed for a sale. They weren't just unethical, they were sloppy. That same day, I finally got in touch with Sarah Chin, a property rights attorney who sounded about as impressed by Karen's paperwork as a rattlesnake is by a shoe. I brought every document I had to her office Wednesday morning. She spread them across the table, started comparing dates, signatures, plats, notices, and then she went very still. That's never a bad sign in a lawyer. "Jake," she said, "I don't think this HOA has any authority over your ranch at all." She pulled the original 2019 subdivision plat, and there it was, clear as daylight. Maplewood Heights ended where my property began. My ranch had been explicitly excluded. Karen's entire claim rested on a covenant extension that had never been properly approved, and worse than that, appeared to include my forged consent. I just stared at Sarah. Then came the twist that turned my anger into cold, beautiful certainty. Sarah tracked down Robert Kumar, the surveyor whose name was on Karen's 2022 boundary survey. Put him on speakerphone. He'd never surveyed my ranch, never worked for the HOA, never signed that document. His signature had been forged. The room went dead quiet after that. You know those moments when the truth is so ugly it actually calms you down? That was one of them. Because once forgery walked into the room, this stopped being Karen's petty power trip and became what it really was. Fraud. Deliberate, greedy, coordinated fraud. And Sarah didn't stop there. She found out Karen's real estate company had an exclusive listing agreement lined up for my ranch. Forced sale, quick turnover, massive commission. Suddenly, the whole thing made perfect sense. This was never about fences or cattle or community standards. This was about money. My grief just happened to create a window she thought she could crawl through. By Thursday, my kitchen had turned into a war room. Sarah with legal filings. Bill Hendricks, my 73-year-old neighbor and retired county surveyor, checking maps and boundary lines. Tommy coordinating cameras. Emma researching statutes like she was cramming for a final exam in righteous vengeance. The more we dug, the uglier it got. Wrong email address on the notices, no lawful lien, fake survey, no permit, financial motive. And then, like the universe deciding Karen had tempted fate enough, Jennifer Walsh flipped. That quiet HOA secretary everybody thought was just Karen's loyal little helper. She'd been saving emails. She sent over messages showing Karen and Dr. Stanton discussing my property, the profit, the timing. One message from Karen said, once we get Morrison's land, we split the profit. That was the moment even the air in the house felt different. We weren't defending anymore, we were hunting. Sarah filed an emergency injunction. The sheriff's office was alerted. Reporters circled. Secure Shield, the security company Karen hired for auction day, backed out when they saw the filings. Her own lawyer withdrew. The board started cracking. Marcus resigned. Patricia wanted the whole thing stopped. Dr. Stanton suddenly remembered he had a conscience. Saturday morning came cold and clear, frost crunching under our boots. By 6 o'clock, people were gathering at my ranch. Neighbors, reporters, Sarah with her briefcase, Bill with his survey tools, Tommy with cameras, Emma with that fierce look she gets when she knows she's right. Deputies took up positions near the road. News vans lined the entrance. It didn't look like an auction. It looked like Judgment Day with coffee. Karen still showed up. White Mercedes, tight smile, eyes twitching. At 8:30, Sarah handed her the injunction in front of everybody. Karen tore it up on camera. At 9, Sheriff Martinez arrived, read the order, and told her plainly to stop. Then Robert Kumar stepped forward and said loud enough for the whole crowd to hear, "That survey uses my forged signature." You could hear people gasp. And then right on cue, 2 black SUVs rolled in. FBI. I will never forget Karen's face in that moment. It was like watching a woman realize gravity applies to her too. Agent Rodriguez walked up, identified himself, and told her they needed to speak with her regarding federal fraud charges. Jennifer arrived seconds later with her laptop and handed over the email archive that finished the job. Karen made one last desperate play, climbed onto a makeshift podium, and tried to start the auction anyway. That lasted about 10 seconds. The sheriff ordered her down. She screamed. The FBI agent produced the warrant. And right there on the gravel road my grandfather laid half a century ago, Karen Whitfield was arrested in front of cameras, neighbors, and half the internet. The crowd erupted. Not because people enjoy seeing a woman in handcuffs. At least I hope not. But because everybody there knew what was really being arrested wasn't just Karen. It was arrogance. It was fraud in a blazer. It was that smug little belief some people have that if they print enough paperwork and say authority often enough, truth will roll over and die. After they led her to the vehicle, I walked over to that giant auction sign, wrapped both hands around the post, and yanked it out of my yard. The dirt that came with it was my dirt, Morrison dirt, fed by my grandfather's sweat, my father's labor, my own broken back. I snapped that sign over my knee, and the crack echoed across the pasture like the cleanest sound I'd heard all year. People cheered. Cameras flashed. My cattle just kept grazing unimpressed, which honestly felt appropriate. Later, standing on my porch, I looked out at the crowd and said the only thing that really mattered. This land belonged to my grandfather, then my father, and now me. It was never for sale. And somewhere in all that noise, after the funeral, after the fear, after the rage, I understood something. I wish I'd learned earlier. Power doesn't always come wearing a badge or carrying a gun. Sometimes it comes smiling, carrying a binder, using words like compliance and procedure and community. Sometimes evil is just greed with good posture. And if decent people stay quiet because they want to avoid conflict, that kind of evil grows teeth. A month later, Karen pleaded guilty. The board collapsed. The community apologized. Emma framed the original deed and hung it in our living room beside an old photo of my grandfather building that fence. Sometimes I catch her staring at it, and I know she's not just looking at paper. She's looking at proof that legacy means nothing if you won't defend it. These days, I still sit on the porch at sunset. The mountains go purple, the cattle settle in the wind, moves through the cedar posts, and the ranch sounds like itself again. Peaceful, earned. Karen thought grief made me weak. She thought timing was on her side. She thought my father's funeral would be the moment my family lost everything. Instead, it became the moment she lost hers. So let me ask you this. When power starts crossing the line, when rules become a weapon and silence helps the wrong people win, Where do you think justice begins? In the courtroom or the moment somebody finally says no? Tell me in the comments, was this justice karma or both? And if you've ever dealt with HOA abuse, fake authority, or somebody trying to bully you off what was rightfully yours, share your story too.